you can get anybody to do anything with steady, loving confrontation.
We are discussing 3 books today.
I will read from the second chapter from my novel Death is Hard Work.
I love this book. It's meant a lot to me, and this is terrifying because she's in the room, and I'm a big fan.
A book about don't let the words kill you.
So, Hadley, did you like it as much as Ida?
I loved this book. I so loved it. I couldn't get hold of it where I lived.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Bergen International Literature Festival for you who have come now for the first time. I'm Teresa Grøtan. I'm the festival director, and I'm going to say a few things before we invite the winners of our competition up on stage. This competition was started as a collaboration between the festival and the Bjerknes Centre for Climate Research and also the Rafto Foundation for Human Rights. And we wanted to see what young people in the world wanted to say in their own words about the climate crisis. We did it quite easily on social media, announcing the competition, and we're quite surprised when the deadline came on October 15th, and we had received submissions from 117 different countries. It is really, it's really wonderful, 552 entries. And we have had several rounds of eliminations of these submissions and have ended up with 2 winners and also 2 runner-ups that you will meet on 2 short videos that we will shortly be showing you. To us, it was also important that we would have an international jury for this selection. And we managed to put together a jury with Nimo Bassi from Nigeria, Tishani Doshi from India, Daniel Medin from the US and France, Kerim Nisancioglu from Norway, Pivinguak Mørk from Greenland, Larry Thomas from Fiji, and myself. So it's been very inspiring working with this. After we have seen these 2 short videos, we will welcome Kikki Kleiven, who is a director of the Bjerknes Centre, up on stage to conduct interviews with our 2 winners that I will not reveal the names before they come up, and also our researchers who will look into this. But you will now meet Andrea Yang from the US, and she will read her poem Bioluminescence that came in second for the competition. And after her, you will meet Amarachi Udochukwu from Nigeria, who came in second for the essay competition. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Andrea Yang. I'm from Arizona. I decided to join this competition because I believe that the climate crisis is something that we should all be discussing and thinking about as it affects all of us. And I had written this poem as a form of admiration for the environment, as well as to convey certain frustrations, but also hope that I have for humanity as well. So here's my poem, Bioluminescence. Bioluminescence. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, bioluminescence is the production and emission of light by a living organism. See also, exotic, lotus blossom trope. See how I relax, how I, like Hyloceras, unfurl. There are no natural bioluminescent flowers. They are engineered. Can we engineer attraction too? See also Darwinian evolution, white savior complex. See how we glow in the same light, the same absence of light. Bioluminescent species, they say, evolved separately over 40 different times. Pinpointed for momentary beauty, forgotten in the same breath as the dawning spotlight, reinvented for relevant fascination. How many evolutions of hyper-fetishization must we endure? Hyloceras grow by hanging, climbing, or epiphytic. Hyloceras bloom for one night only, they say. We are dependent upon one another to survive, to hide, desert-bound, light-blind. We are burned, buried, in single dimensions, in half eyes. See also fragmented language, fragmentation of the self. See my other in mirror images, in reflective buildings, shattered in the ivory screen, pruned for perfection, docile, dainty, domesticated, or dragon lady. Trade my depth for open-faced flower, for surface-level love. They say bioluminescence is a form of communication. See also female objectification, yellow peril. See how I unfurl a reluctant revolution, illumination, to warn or evade predators, to lure or detect prey. See our bioluminescence for the taking, for the temptation, elimination, as if you could steal light the way people sell stars and lamps, sell gold rush dreams and broken promises, and trample cities for modernity. Bioluminescence is a cold light, they say. There is no rising from the ashes when the phoenix is buried beneath your feet. Amidst the world of filters and processed photographs and vetted vocabulary, what agency is allotted to flowers? According to National Geographic, bioluminescence is a type of chemiluminescence, a chemical reaction where light is produced. See also Genesis, deliverance, rebirth, absolution. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Udochukwu Chidera Amarachi. I'm from Imo State, Nigeria, and presently I'm a 7U core member in Delta State, Nigeria. I joined this competition because I wanted to talk about climate change. I wanted to use my voice and this platform to talk about climate change. There's a lot going on around us. The rivers are drying up. There are effects of flooding, especially in Lagos, Nigeria. And yet nobody talks about it. Nobody is saying anything about it. We are watching as climate change is really taking effect all around us. And yet everybody is silent about the matter. I specifically wrote about a river in my village which over the years has seemingly dried up or doesn't come around as often as it used to be because of how climate change has been taking effect on it all through the years. That is basically why I decided to join the Lead First Bergen competition in which I came second. I'm really grateful for this opportunity and for this platform to have a voice on matters that concern us as a society or concerns my country and the society at large. The title of my story is Till the Rivers Come Home, and I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs of my story. Here it goes. Cry me a river. It was in the year 2023, and the northwest wind carried the dust and brown sand from the Sahara and threw it into the Oketanko River, our sacred river, in our hometown of Amankotambiri in Imo State. It blew across the rainforest and the savannah like a goddess on revenge, carrying sand and hot-blooded reptiles in its wake. We had never witnessed a dry season so vicious that made the wells dry and the sand very hot. That year, our river didn't come home. The Oketanko River had always been of cultural and spiritual significance to our people. Grandma told us that in the days of her youth, a child would be cradled by the traditional priest who would scoop a handful of water and sprinkle the droplets on the forehead of the crying baby. The child would be given to her father, who whispers her names. Mmiriozozo, the rain has come. Obianoju, born into wealth, and Nnenna, our mother, has returned. That way, the child would never forget where she came from. She would always follow the river home. This was how it was done in the past. But as the water kept on becoming small and polluted, the father would take some sand from the earth, mix it with a little spittle his tongue could provide, and smear the wet earth on the head of the child. The father would pray that the child's life will be memories of moist soils that still grew greens and rivers overflowing their banks. He took the umbilical cord and buried it under the leaves of the Udala tree, whose roots reached deep into the ground. It had been a wonder in its youth when the water ran through its veins, but now its snarling face etched on its back was riddled with woody wrinkles, recalling the agony in its death, looking twisted and thirsty. That was an excerpt from my story that took the second position in the Litfest essay competition titled Crime Me a River. Thank you so very much to the organizers of this competition. I'm very, very grateful to have emerged second place out of all the amazing entries. I still remain Udochukwu Chidera Amarachi from Mbiri, Imo State. Thank you so much and God bless you.
Thank you very much for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Welcome to Bergen again. I'll introduce you very shortly. The world's best climate stories. Welcome to this conversation with our two writing competition winners and two local climate researchers. Starting with you, Teresa Grøtan, US citizen, born in or resident of LA, California, student, and Maya Taiman, originally from Sao Paulo, Brazil, now on a research stay in Paris, but you're studying in Vermont in the US at Middlebury College. And with me on stage is also Siri Veland. What I forgot to say, of course, is that Teresa won the poem and Maya the essay. I think we should give them an applause. And with me on stage is also Siri Veland, who's the senior researcher at NORSE, human geographer. And your work concerns humans, of course, and how we relate to local environment, to policy and governance. You work with local communities, nations, and industries, both in the Arctic, in Australia, East Africa, and also in Europe, and here in Norway. And Kerim Nisancioglu, who is a professor in climate research at University of Bergen at the Bjerknes Centre. But you also have a little bit of a special role here. You've been a jury member. You are leader of the huge transdisciplinary climate project, Climate Narratives. And I think it's safe to say that the idea of this competition very much came from you and shared with a lot of others as well. So I want to start with you a little bit, Kerim. Dissolution, the name and the theme for this conversation and competition. Why an international literate competition? Why now, and why focus on dissolution?
So the idea came from discussions, right, with Teresa on the literature festival some time ago, and from the experience they had of having a literature competition for young authors some year or two ago. And what we talked about is, at least from my perspective, is we're sitting in Bergen, Norway, almost in the Arctic. We are, a big center of scientists working on climate change, but it's a bit abstract, right? I teach lots of people take courses on climate change or sustainability or oceanography or meteorology, but what does it mean, climate change, and also dissolution? What does it mean, right? What does it mean to people? And so the idea came, how about we basically, at least, this is a chance to voice and to learn through the voice of young people around the world what it means. What does climate change, environmental change mean in the different parts of the world? And having so many essays and poems from all over the world gives an impression of what concern young people today and what is real climate change, environmental change today.
You were in a jury. Siri, you also participated in reading many of the entries. First of all, were you surprised at the amount of entries? 117 nations with contribution.
Yeah, no, it's impressive and daunting and just really heartening as well that so many young people would sit down at home and write these poems and these essays from all corners of the world and send them in here for us to read. It's, yeah.
Did you see when you were reading them, was there any parallels that are popping up, any common denominator, words, any similarities in the expressions and the themes?
Absolutely, no. And I think that the way that these poems and stories are written is a reflection of how the climate change story is told as well. It is dramatic. We're suffering a lot of loss. There's anxiety and worry about what's to come. There's a sorrow and a sadness about what's being lost. And there's a description of what this is doing to us, sort of emotional, personal ways, and the violence that's being done to the environments around us. So that was a reflection and maybe expected from what we saw. But so you were saying we had about 350 of these, and we had to ask if they wanted to participate in a research study. So we had about 280 who accepted. So I've been looking through those and seeing, well, what kind of words, what kinds of terms, grammar are people using when they're writing? And that was quite surprising because I was expecting to see a lot of negative terms, right? Because I was sitting with this feeling of sadness and loss after reading them, but when I'm seeing the word clouds and sort of, what words are being used the most, it's about care, it's about love, it's about togetherness. And that maybe what these stories are writing is in a kind of inverted sense of the things that matter to us and what it really means to lose these.
Any positive narratives also, Kerim?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? I mean, like Siri says, there's a lot of anxiety, and we know that. I think also the authors here on the big screen, this is a chance to work with that anxiety and have a get it out. Some of you know the Norwegian author Alan Loe. I think also a big process of being able to just voice what you're thinking or your concerns or getting out, and they talked about here in the Literature Festival yesterday, through what you write. And then that story turns into something not only like the anxiety or the negative parts of climate change, but also the positive part of an understanding of what's happening, a knowledge locally of what's happening, and a concern for what's happening locally, and an engagement, and then turning into action from people locally through the voices and the knowledge that you share with the world, right? That's kind of a more, to me, positive thing, a call to action.
And one of the many reasons why it's important to not just sit and have this conversation today, but to write and express is also something that you brought up. We met and talked a little bit yesterday, which is really nice. And Siri, you brought up this communication gap. That we have all the sciences, we should act, but there's a gap. There's a gap, potentially in understanding, but definitely in communication, like a narrative gap, maybe a gap of images and stories.
Exactly, yes. We talk a lot in climate change communication about the communication gap between the scientists getting the data and the results, and it reaching the general population, so that and policymakers and so on, so that they can use the insights for policy. We often talk about there being a gap, and the narrative form is talked about as something that's really helpful, and it's a tool, but something that me and my colleagues have been thinking a lot about is this narrative gap, really, that's more about the way that we're storying what we're seeing, right? That these science narratives are important, but they don't necessarily engage, and they don't necessarily imagine for us what the future or the road towards a future that is sustainable, that is just. How do we imagine those places? Because the stories that we write are never just simple descriptions of the world around us, right? they're also creating the world around us by the terms and the stories that we're telling. And so there's just so much power in these poems and short stories here in terms of just increasing the amount of imagination that we're putting into both understanding the problems, but also what kinds of action we can make too.
And in your essay, Maya, The Turbines, and in your poem, Hemorrhage, Teresa, you are filling this gap and you are creating images and you are, I would say, making new images as well and providing us perspective and sharing some of your inner thoughts as well. Do you feel that you have a voice, that this competition is giving you a voice?
Definitely. I feel that it can be hard to not only have a voice myself, but be able to have the voices that I happen to write about for my essay, or that often don't have a chance to be represented on an international stage like this one, getting their climate issues out there, explaining what are the consequences of what they suffer, either due to renewable energy or any climate issue. And I feel like platforms such as this one really allow to mend that gap and create those bridges.
And Carissa, are you happy you came?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I feel the same way. I feel like what you were saying about the communication gap, a lot of times with the data, it'll say things like that temperatures are going to be rising by 1 degree or sea levels are going to be rising by 5 inches. And to us, that doesn't seem like very much when in reality it's catastrophic. So I think that being able to create new imagery through my poetry is really a much more effective way to show people how visceral and how personal the data and things can be.
You both allowed me to share your writings. And I want to start with the essay, your essay, Maya, The Turbines. And the jury said about that, or described it as the lesser-known side effect of the drive towards a world without fossil fuel, namely the negative effect on people, nature, and animals living in the proximity of wind turbines. A story that is also, as you know now, very real here in Norway, and an anxiety that worries many if this happened. So I want to read your text. The day they arrived and set up the turbines, nobody in Kaetes knew what was to come. Contrasting against the dry Caatinga desert, tall and wide, Caatinga, a word derived from the Tupi language, quite literally means white forest. The biome itself, native to the Brazilian Northeast, makes up a vast shrubland and thorn forest, taken over with a dry appearance in a thoroughly dry environment. These new trees, however, did not blend in with the Mandakaru cactus and the Juazeiro tree. Standing tall against a semi-arid background, none of the 28,000 inhabitants of Caeres could foresee that what was going to change in their lives was beyond a simple visual disruption. Reaching 150 meters into the sky, the white towers are hard to miss for anyone going by the small municipality of Caeres. When driving by wind power farms in the Brazilian Northeast, a region that represents the center of the implementation of the government's transition towards renewable energy, it's impossible not to notice how the giant helixes spinning non-stop. In all of my childhood visits to the region, I was always struck in awe and admiration for the turbines. Coming from the city, far away in the southeast, where the wind doesn't blow and green populates every landscape, watching the turbines spin in the distance was always one of the most impressive parts of visiting the Northeast. I always found it incredible how they were able to generate power from the wind, and there I was watching the living proof. I never got close enough to see the other side of things. A hidden, not so pleasant truth about what happens when wind turbines are installed in someone's backyard. Even though the Caatinga biome covers an area of over 280,000 square miles, these towers are often placed in some not so remote places. I'm no wind power engineer and have no idea what goes on into deciding where to place these enormous structures. But ever so often, a town like Caetes will get the notice that a wind farm is to be built there. Locals get notified that energy producing wind turbines will be placed in their backyards, and in exchange, that get a share of the profits from the energy production. More specifically, residents were offered 1.5% of revenue generated, equivalent to 2,000 Brazilian reais per month, almost twice as much as a minimum salary. As a small rural district in the hinterland of the state of Pernambuco, most people in Caetés are small-scale farmers, owners of their own land. The contracts proposed by the wind power companies in 2014 were 49 years long and could only be revoked in agreement with all parties involved. However, the companies were reserved all rights to shift control over the wind farms to other enterprises without the consent of the locals. 220 towers were installed in the small town, and most farmers who agreed on such contracts were able to relocate to larger cities under a newfound financial stability. They couldn't foresee the troubles that were to come to their neighbors who choose to keep their old way of life. 150 meters tall and 50 meters wide, the towers shadow over the houses, farms, and businesses of 120 local families in Caetés. Day and night, they buzz. Zupu, zupu, zupu is how one of the locals described it. When you go to bed, a constant buzz. At the breakfast table, a constant buzz. When harvesting the land, a constant buzz, non-stop, all day. As loud as 40 decibels, the equivalent of listening to the hum of a refrigerator, except it's non-stop. The loudness increases and decreases with the strength of the wind, but it remains present nonetheless. As long as the turbines are moving, as long as energy is being produced for those far away to enjoy, it buzzes inside the head of most of the 28,000 locals. The WHO recommends an average night noise of no more than 40 decibels to prevent adverse health effects. That's for the night period, when the minds can be put to rest and recharge for perhaps louder daytime. At Caetés, there is no rest. Acacio Norrena, a local, described it as loud whistle. A dog barks, a plane that never fully takes off. He's on medication for anxiety and insomnia, a combination that's not uncommon for those who live with a constant buzzing. And I'm going to go to the last part of your essay now. As we move forward with improving how we implement change without harming the environment, we need to remember that people, often vulnerable people, also exist within sad environment. The energy is clean, and so should be the conscience of those who fight for it. The wind isn't going anywhere. The funds are laid for hundreds of new wind turbines. How far from people's houses are they going to be? Should we give some applause for that? And your poem, Carissa, Hemorrhage, is, as you describe it yourself, fictionally, it's imaginary. It certainly spoke to me as a woman, as a mom, and of a very different generation also. The jury describes it as a poem that expresses that Mother Earth is hurting, is in great pain, yet we continue to live out our lives as if there is no crisis. The female persona, imaginary persona, of the poem is also suffering from society's demands on women. And the poet compares the exploitation of natural resources with the exploitation of women by the beauty industry. Both nature and the female body are preyed upon for profit. And bear with me, because I'm expressing your voice now. But thank you for allowing me. Hemorrhage. Daughter, is it fair to keep you knowing what you will inherit? Will you understand the stories I read to you? Skin as white as snow, lips as pink as roses. Will there be roses at all, petals for you to pluck? Grass to stain your knees, trees to climb. I used to think Mother Nature was a real person, like Santa, that she breathed life into every seed, and even with shriveled hands, lines cut into her face, she was radiant, peaceful, eternal. Santa, what will I tell you about him? The North Pole gone liquid? But what about the reindeer? You'll ask. Will you ever know the scent of pine? mingling with cookies from the oven? Will you even know trees? Winter, cold. 6 months since I first bled. At 15, I'm a late bloomer. Will you understand the metaphor? Anthesis, tulips in April? 6 weeks without even a cramp, until I finally took notice. I never thought we'd meet like this. An extra line on a plastic stick, your first introduction. I've heard my generation is the first to have a lower quality of life than our parents. What will become of yours, I wonder? Is the purpose of life to create more life? I learned in biology class. Every quirk of my body by design, every impulse and thought predestined, my entire existence optimized on you. I optimize myself otherwise too. Stuffing in my bra, glitter smearing my eyelids. I buy my sustainable skincare from my favorite actress. Her jet emits 5,000 tons of carbon per year. One of my friends is already saving up for implants. She wants her breasts to look like this forever. Centuries from now, twin discs of silicon will remain a testament to her everlasting beauty, Greek sculpture of the modern age. Yet in all our artifice, it remains the ultimate compliment for a woman to be a flower, a summer day, a pearl. True perfection is only of the earth. And like her, we are stripped, hacked up, pruned, made into objects to be consumed, insisting it is of our own violation all the way. No, volition all the way. Forests cut down for the profit of corporation, ribs removed from waists, fluid pumped into bedrocks and injected into lips. Ostensibly, these procedures done to maximize our potential, to attract investors, or suitable mates. The most natural of all things turn synthetic. Seduction is a game we play, one with niceties and unspoken rules. But what will happen when mass displacement, scorching summers, lack of food, make all of our customs and manners wither away, and women, once prized possession, loses all choices in her objectification? As in crisis past, girls become prey. Only we will have no allies, no sanctuary, no hope of peace. Even beauty, charm, the things we have spent our whole life pursuing, turned meaningless, attempts to evoke mercy, as fruitless as the once abundant trees. My whole life culminated in your creation. You are my destiny, my bloodline, my raison d'être. How can I let you fight when I know I can never shield you? Once you're my age, will there still be clean air to breathe, fresh water to drink? Are you only truly safe in here, in the size of a lentil, lodged somewhere below my stomach? Before she was a mother, was nature a girl too? If she had known what would happen to her daughters, would she have chosen to carry them at all? Without begonias and beaches, she might have been bored, but would she, much wiser than I, pick dullness over desiccation? Daughters, 5 years later, and I still think of you, unsure of whether I made the right choice. Sometimes I dream about giving birth, but even my imagination, there are complications. You come out the wrong way, or I bleed too much, and I never once hold you against my heart. Perhaps life is safer like this. My cycle never skipping another month, the routine distracting me from higher temperatures, rising seas. I'll sleep better knowing you won't face any of it. Does it actually matter how often I shed blood when I know that it all ends in hemorrhage? I want to start with you two, because how do we tackle an anxiety-inducing, oversaturated, and apocalyptic issue like climate change that you so clearly both expressed? And its poetry and essays doesn't usually come to people's mind when we think about ways to engage. We want to engage people, we want action, engage with climate change. But what urged you two to express the climate crisis using these two literary genres. Do you want to start, Teresa?
Sure. So I actually think that literature and all art is really one of the best ways that you can express the climate crisis, because it's one of the best ways that you can express your anxiety, and I think that that's the dominant emotion that our generation has towards climate change. There is just so much unknown and so much fear, and I think that the best way that that can be reflected is through art.
Maya?
I feel that I've always been moved by stories, and not necessarily data or raw numbers, but knowing how people experience things. Even if I'm not seeing the impact myself, in every single possible way as it happens around the world, I feel that stories are an amazing way to help us connect with those communities that we don't often see.
Sometimes we process things, I sometimes process things by being just sitting down listening to music or going out for a walk or just trying to clear my mind. Do you process when you write?
Definitely, yeah. I think that it's a great way to just, I think that especially writing this poem, I really just started out with the metaphor, the idea that silicone as an implant is something that doesn't decompose, and it's something that lasts longer than your own body. And for the women who do choose to get implants, that is the final legacy that they leave. That's the thing that will remain hundreds of years from now. And that was how I started to think about the ways that both women and the earth are exploited. And I think that writing this was very cathartic, because it was a way for me to really think about all the ways that all the parallels between women and the earth. And it was definitely a really great way to sort of also confront the idea of having children with the climate crisis.
This is your first poem, right?
Yeah, this is the first one that I've written all the way through.
Good. And this is not your first essay.
I'm not used to writing journalistic style essays, but mostly academic, but of this kind I would say it's the first, but hopefully not the last.
But you say you're almost in a process now of potentially creating more.
Yes, so this all started as a workshop of an environmental creative writing class I was taking last fall at university, and I've been fortunate enough to gather a few chapters so far, and this is all very encouraging to keep writing more and finding more stories.
So now you have a platform of engagement. You have an audience, have recordings. I know some families watching this or hearing it, and you're asking if it's going to have a life beyond this. But do you want to go home and engage?
Definitely, yes. I want to write more. I want to create more opportunities for more people to write and just paint or express their feelings about the climate through whatever medium of art they choose.
You're touching on, Carissa, you're touching on a subject that's a little bit all-consuming. I mean, as a woman, we know that women are extra hurt by climate change through displacement, and climate is also exacerbating a lot of other crises as well. All of us sitting here in the audience, we're from the West, a Western audience, but still, your country is developing very differently than my country is developing towards women right now. We can share a little bit about that, Brazil as well, but the war against women is not making it any easier to stand up for important causes.
Absolutely, yeah. About 2 years ago now, in America, Roe v. Wade was overturned, which was created to have federal protection for abortion. Luckily, in California, abortion is still very much protected, but throughout the rest of the country, there is definitely a sentiment that we are moving backwards with the way that we treat our women. And I definitely feel that that is similar to the way that the attitude that we have towards the environment and towards climate change. For a long time, when I was younger, it was a big issue. It was something that everybody was very, very aware of and very acknowledging that it existed, but now it's difficult. There's a lot more polarization. There's a lot more people who refuse to even look at the numbers, to even acknowledge the issues, to even acknowledge that it's a real thing. And so I liked being able to bring attention to both of those issues at the same time.
So I think I'm the oldest in the audience. I'm born in this group, I'm born in 1969. Siri, you don't have to out your age, but I think it's fair to say that Siri and I are a different generation than you two. And I often think that it was easier to grow up when I grew up, for many reasons, one of them being social media, but also basically, I felt that we could express ourselves, both in clothing, body, size. I felt we were more accommodating. I think that image has become narrower and narrower and smaller and smaller. And you're bringing that up in your poetry as well, with the removing ribs and enhancing ourselves, not just with glitter and stuffing our bras, but the expectation of an object as well.
Yes, it's very tragic because with social media and with the way that we are so connected now, we have the potential to expand our ideas of what's okay, of what's acceptable, what's presentable, what is beautiful, but instead the standards are just becoming more and more rigid, and there's really only one standard of beauty, one acceptable look. Yeah.
And I see when I read both your entries, there are some parallels. I mean, both is kind of like a victimization, and victims of the climate crisis. But the citizens in your village are harmed by the attempt to fix the climate, which is, and those are not victims we are always aware, we are really aware of, giving them a unique voice in your essay. And I thought you could share with us, some came true when I read, but share with us a little bit what's actually happening on the ground in this region, what's happening to people.
Yeah, so I've never been to this specific village myself, but I've been fortunate to be in touch over the phone with people from there very recently, and it's all very paradoxical because the wind turbines drive local business and get more people to stay at local hotels and sort of push the economy a little bit, but at the same time at the expense of people who live in this rural area that have their mental health and physical health affected by this phenomenon. So it's, the more you look at it, it just seems more paradoxical, and I guess it just speaks as a whole with the point I was trying to get at of we have renewable energy, and that's the direction we're going in. This green transition exists, but at what cost? And what are the things we have to be aware of that are unforeseen in implementing solutions?
And I remember we talked yesterday, it also struck me as very unfair. It's almost like the power just leaves the country.
Yes. So none of the electricity that's generated by the turbine stays in Brazil. It's all exported. And very few locals have access to solar panels. Most of them just buy electricity from the state that doesn't come from the turbines, based on my recent interviews. So they don't even get to benefit from the thing that's causing the nuisance. They're there as a noise, and the government has the power to move them as pieces in this game of exporting energy.
And you also said that there's no kind of outrage to this. There's no reaction.
I guess that's what drove me to write the story. When I found out about it on YouTube occasionally, I was very outraged and felt that the word had to get out there and didn't understand how this could happen. But the more that I talked to people in Caetés, the more I heard that it is what it is, and there's just this, not necessarily lack of outrage, but lack of actionability in terms of what can be done. Taking down the turbines isn't really an option, and hopefully there can be ways in which this outrage can be shown or vocalized, but it is a power game that's very difficult to fight.
Yeah, it's hard for them to, whether they find resources to stand up, but they have your voice. And you said something that you would like to continue some of these projects. You looked at other energy projects like hydro dams.
Yes, I've been fortunate to have visited communities in Brazil and in India that suffer from consequences of hydroelectrical dams, and just got really interested into the dark side of renewable energy and what are the hidden costs that we don't know, while understanding that we need more renewable energy and that we need to keep making the shift, but really focusing on communities and trying to get their stories out. And I hope to keep writing more about that, but also on the positive aspects that communities get from renewable energy that we're not aware of. So both sides are definitely something I'm interested in.
Well, we have a lock in our story when it comes to wind turbines in Norway, definitely. Siri, human geographers, should be part of this work of talking to communities and finding out why are people so much against it? What actually took place?
Yeah, and I hate to be too critical of colleagues who are doing this work as well, but I think I want to think back on this idea of objectification, right? Because we do have an approach often to these developments that are done in quite sort of objective ways, right? You have a consequence evaluation, you have an impact assessment that often in some ways has weighted what people care about, but they've weighted those things, against other environmental concerns that have to do with biodiversity and cultural heritage and other economic industries and things like that, and sort of arrive at, okay, so this is the place we have to put it, and then we just kind of have to deal with the consequences of it, right? That's how the decision-making is often done, and it's a national government decision. And once that decision is made, the local community doesn't have a say. It gets implemented. And I think that often those processes happen in ways that are quite enraging, right? Because I wasn't allowed to be a part of this decision-making. And one thing I'm curious about is what happens when we create processes that are truly participatory, where we find ways of creating conditions for coexistence, whether turbines or the dams or whichever energy plants we're going to have are placed and used in ways that work better with the rhythms and the priorities and the needs of these local communities. I'm very much an optimist. I think there are ways of doing this that are just, but I think that the ways that we are doing it now leaves some things to be desired. We do need better processes, we do need better engagement and involvement of local communities so that it's done in ways that don't damage our health.
This is something to do research on, Maya. Yes. On the future. I want to move a little bit over to another subject. I always sleep long on Saturdays and have a big breakfast. So I was sitting talking to my son, he's 19. And we talked about this conversation, and I read your poetry, and he read your essay, and so we shared about it. And I was looking forward to this conversation, and he said, What is it with you, Mom? It was like, you always, like, why are you always so happy? You seem so carefree. What is it with your generation? Like, do you have no worries at all? And I said, sure, I worry about some things. I worry about you. But he said, but I worry every day. My friends, we talk about that all the time. We worry about things. We're afraid what's going to happen. It's going to happen to us. We're going to have the same future. Didn't mention climate so much. He probably has too much of it at home, but definitely environment and energy as a future frustration. In your poem, you're writing this. I heard my generation is the first to have a lower quality of life than our parents. What will become of yours, I wonder, speaking to your imaginary daughter. And first of all, Kerim, as a little bit oldies, do you really think we just think differently? Do you think this is a real generation gap in terms of anxiety and thoughts for the future?
This is the issue, right? So reading these stories and poems and listening to also the potential choice that women are now, or young women are doubting whether they should have children. And yeah, like you said, none of us had this, or I'm a man, of course. I have 3 children though, but that was never a concern. And I think you're in the years where, this is really the important years of your life in many ways, and forming the rest of your life. And we had a different experience when growing up that didn't expose us to this. So we're came through in a different, not concerned, and we didn't have the anxiety for this in the same scale that you were experiencing. So, and that makes me worried, because I think a lot of us elders, in this case, I have a gray beard, soon 50, do not understand what the younger generation are thinking and what you're thinking. And I almost, emotional in tears when reading this text, because it's so important that we have that knowledge and that we act on it. And that's like, the 550 people and those of you out there on YouTube probably watching, this is so important. That voice comes out, and that we and all of us collectively do something with that knowledge.
But Carissa, it's a tough poem to read.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that even though it's imaginary mom that's talking through there, it's clearly that this affects you. But what about your future hopes? You want to be a student? You want to continue?
Definitely. I think that, I think in the face of any sort of anxiety, it's important to just continue doing what you're doing. And I think that with this topic, the most important thing is just to spread awareness and to show that you can express your own anxiety, because I know that it's very common. I know just from talking to my friends and stuff, and to Maya, even though we're both not necessarily thinking about having children or anything like that yet, the idea of whether or not we want to do that, whether or not we want to pursue our own futures, if we know that in our lifetimes or in our children's lifetimes, the world is just going to be so different. We don't even know if it's going to be habitable, but I think it's just very important to keep going, keep on pursuing the things that you care about.
I'm not going to push you on motherhood. I don't think that's fair at all. but are there any specific issues you worry about?
Well, just the climate. Whether or not the world is going to be habitable, whether or not, there is going to be clean air to breathe, there's going to be enough fresh water to drink, whether the sea levels are going to be rising,
You're stressed about environmental problems? Or is it climate? What is that?
Always have been. I'm not sure I see that as very separate.
No.
I think it all comes together at the end. But yes, definitely very stressed about energy and about how we can make the change, not only on time, but make it right. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen. So it's a constant worry.
You dwelled into the Siri. Why youth specifically? Why is the youth so worried now?
No, I want to say, I'm 79 model. So I started studying in 99, and I studied global environmental crises as part of my human geography degree. And I feel like the bubble I was in my undergraduate has now expanded to include youth everywhere. And so I feel like I can relate, because I had that feeling then, and I'm shocked. I think as we age, time passes very quickly, and I look back and 20 years have passed, and I'm shocked by how little we've been able to do. I thought then, I was studying in Australia, that it would be too expensive for me to fly to Norway and in Australia 20 years from now, so I should move back home quickly. It's cheaper now than it was then per income. And so I can understand the concern, frankly. But I also think that part of the reason why there is concern is a reflection of the way that we're communicating the climate change story too. It is in the genre of apocalypse and loss. And I do think that we have a responsibility to write a different kind of climate genre that opens up more possibilities, that uses more. I'm not saying this to youth, I'm saying this to maybe more so to us who've been around for a while, a responsibility to tell stories in a way that open up possibilities for livable, thriving, caring futures. And there are some examples out there. There are some authors who do that for us. And I just really want to encourage us to tell stories with more encouragement and to see the possibilities that there are. I'm convinced there are ways of thriving through this transition. But we do need to recognize what's going on.
To add to that, because I think, I'm a physicist, so one of those nerds sitting in front of the computer most of the day. And how do we engage with people, or how do we engage with youth, right? How do we make knowledge available and practical and useful and create active choices. And that's where I think art comes in, and also social science, but art in particular, because it is a way, when working together, where you can really tell those stories or make people, through emotions, make people change. Whereas pure science, pure facts doesn't do that. There's not necessarily, if there's no story with it, like you said, storytelling, and also the positive stories and the actual examples that are important to get out there of how can we make a difference? And that's what my students are often asking now. So what can I do? And I have a long list, and I won't reiterate it here, but there's so many positive things one can do.
I can say that I think a part of the reason why there's such a negative attitude is that in my own education, even as far back as elementary school, whatever we've even learned about nature or just about the world, it's always, a part of that has always been about climate change. And I remember learning about rainforest for the first time in school, and then at the end of we watched this movie about it, and at the end, our teacher was telling us about how every second they chop down a football field's worth of rainforest in the Amazon. And so it's always sort of been a mix. Whenever we've learned, we haven't really learned about nature or the world separate from climate change. It's something that has just pervaded everything.
Yeah, it's something I also see reflected in how many people in our generation choose to go about their careers and early life decision making. The second most popular degree at my university, which I do, is environmental studies. So there's definitely a lot of people who, ever since always our age, I think, have had it ingrained that either through the arts or science, this will be a part of what they do in some way. And I think that's a new thing that hasn't always been the case.
I think a lot of what we talked about, what's come up today, is also this, that we have to move towards some more interactions together, more communication together. And yesterday when we were discussing, I wonder if Siri and Kerim has left at that time, but you talked about how we could try to form more voices. You challenged a little bit that something that could come out of this competition, how it could live on, and how we could share knowledge. Could you share a little bit of that with us here in the end? Because you had some thought-provoking ideas there.
Yeah, I was thinking that you should start maybe a magazine or something that you could publish quarterly or yearly, where you could feature more disciplines. You could feature a lot more different writing. You could feature art. We were talking about sort of how it's difficult to connect the data and the experience. So I was saying maybe you could have a project where you had you gave a lecture to different students and they would then write or draw how they sort of interpreted the data that they were hearing about.
And clearly there's a lot of outreach from this institution, this competition having 117 countries represented. So the opportunity to get people from everywhere is already there.
Yeah.
And I think that's also an essential piece to make sure that whatever publication this idea represents can be very abrangent of a multitude of people.
Well, Carissa and Maya, you're the first alumni from this competition, the first winners, and it's been a privilege to have you on stage. It's been a privilege to read your texts. Again, incredibly strong voices that makes me very optimistic for the future, and I hope that you are also more optimistic to see and experience that your voices matter, your texts matter, and your thoughts are actually leaving us with a strong impression. Thank you very much.
Thank you.